All right, so yesterday we talked about a few key innovators of the second wave of the Industrial Revolution and what they brought to this new age, this new era. So we already mentioned about the first wave. I don't think we need to talk about that too much anymore. Second wave, a little bit different. Okay, a lot more innovations, making life and the production of goods, materials, a little bit more convenient. So there you go. I'll let you guys get working on this. We'll reconvene to talk about it.
This video was sponsored by Great Shadow.
See, we're too smart for you, Bowman. Can't goof off while you're not here, even though we're gonna do it anyway.
Yo, why?
What?
Monetize this video.
No, stop.
Yeah, maybe an increase.
Yeah, you get that $9.48. Oh, you can check it
They don't
later.
get sponsorship.
Just a sponsorship.
Period.
You can check it, you can check
I
it.
knew you were going to say something. Who was it today?
What?
Who was sponsoring us today?
Connor was actually sponsoring us today.
Connor, really? Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure Ray Shadow.
Should have been Rich Wallet.
You should listen to Ray
Or
Shadow.
VPN.
I have Ridge Wallet. Man, it's good. I love it.
Oh, there we go, new sponsorship.
All right, there you go. Cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna forget that much tomorrow. New sponsorship, new sponsorship with Aaron Rodgers. Cause he loves giving out donations.
Thanks.
Yep.
I saw a joke the other day. It's like, oh, Dak Prescott, frustrated after their loss, throws his helmet and it's intercepted. It's like, oh, that was a good one. Thanks, Connor, for the laugh. I appreciate it.
I like that.
You guys need another minute?
Yes.
Okay, one more minute. One more minute. Chat, make sure we had to get our sponsors in now. I was even thinking about starting to record a third period just to avoid you.
Wow. Yeah, but then the online kids would have to wait to pick the class.
True.
Just get it done, you know, but
I know.
it's not boring. I'm just kidding. Oh, just kidding. Please, Lambert.
So make sure you guys take note of these innovators, these vendors of the time. Baby on the test. Right up. So, making sure you have a list. All right, okay, second wave of the Industrial Revolution, where did it occur again? Where did it occur? Where did it happen? Ozzy, go ahead. Germany, yep, good job. If you want to mention the United States as well, that's fine too. Okay, there is an argument to be said with the US as they're becoming a more modern, developed country during this time of the first industrial revolution, moving into the second. There are a lot of innovations, a lot of inventions that's helping when it comes to mass producing goods and materials. And that's going to elevate the United States to becoming the strongest industrial power by the turn of the 1900s. Okay, right before World War I. All right, so if you want to say Germany, United States, that's good. Span of years. What do we say for the span of years of the second wave? Go ahead. Yeah, good job. So you got 1870, right? So right when Germany's unifying as a country, which we'll talk more about probably by the end of the week here, if not by the end of the week, early next week. And that's gonna help us right into imperialism, this second part of the chapter. And once we're finished with that, we will have the exam and move right into World War I. But I will have the game for you, I promise. You guys like to roll dice and play a risk, and that's gonna come. I promise it's gonna be a fun time.
Sounds like if Dungeons and Dragons was in history.
No more sponsors. Okay, no more sponsors.
Just roll
Anyway.
dice, that's the size of the game.
Please, let me get through this. All right, anyway, so we got 1870 to 1914, right? So 1914, start of what? What starts then? Paul, World War I. Yeah, good job, good job. So you can see how these factors of industrialization, when we get to imperialism here, how that's creating intense competition amongst these European countries to a point where sooner or later they're going to collide, right? They're going to collide. All right, so we talked about some of these innovations, but before we get to that, what style of engines do we have with the second wave? So it shifts from steam-powered engines to what? Go ahead, Connor. Combustion, yeah, good job. So you have literally explosions occurring inside of these engines, allowing for movement for energy to be produced. All right, so shifting from coal to what type of fuel? So why? Oil, natural gas, good job, petroleum, good. So with that, we have a different fuel source. Okay, so with electricity, chemicals that are being introduced in the industries, into the military, we can see a shift, right? We can see a change from this first wave. All right, so yesterday we talked about a few of these key innovators, right? Friday of last week we talked about them vocab, and then yesterday we dove into a little bit more. So what do we talk about? And what do they contribute to the second wave? Paul, go ahead, go on.
Henry Bessemer, and he made the first inexpensive industrial process for mass producing of steel and molten iron.
Yeah, good job, good job. So with this Bessemer process, is going to be a way to try to mass produce steel, right? And this is a way to try to help when it comes to the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. When you think of these cities, these urban areas, you see skyscrapers, and without the Bessemer process, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have the ability to continue to produce that amount of steel that will help with this modern era, with this developed era, with utilizing steel to the advancements of the time. So not only is it just to create buildings and stronger structures, there's also a need for transportation. So producing these rails that will stretch all across the country, the United States, Great Britain, Germany especially, that will interconnect it, help with the transportation of goods and materials, resources to these urban areas to create finalized goods, products, and help with the economic systems. Right. Also, when you think about the military, right? So with the steel making process, with the mass production of steel, okay, you'll have the ability to create dreadnoughts, tanks, right? Different types of weaponry that's going to be applied to the battlefield. So steel and this steel process, okay, with the United States especially, you're going to see them grow as the mass producer of steel for really the whole world. And with this Bessemer process, you're taking iron and you're melting it down within this huge chamber, and eventually allowing air to flow through it with a intense cooling process, which will stiffen it, which will make it harder and more durable than what we had before with just iron. So with this steel making process, this is going to change the game literally for modern era. All right, so this Bessemer process. Yesterday I told you remember name. I didn't have that as a term. Who brings this Bessemer process to the United States? To Pittsburgh. Yeah. What's his name? Oh, you got
I
it?
know his first name.
Andrew, yeah, okay. Andrew, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Start with an S.
Now. Starts with a C. You ever go out to Pittsburgh, you'll see his name everywhere. Go ahead, Eric. Huh? Carnegie. Yeah, good job, Andrew Carnegie. Good job, Andrew Carnegie. Good, good. So if you go out to Pittsburgh, you'll see a library, museums, you'll see schools, roads, bridges named after this guy because he donates every penny back to the city once he passes away. Can you imagine that? One of the richest men to ever walk foot on the earth, and he just does not leave even a cent to his kids. Can you imagine? His kids are probably like, yeah, this is gonna be an easy life here. Nope. So you gotta make your money just like I did. Innovate. Right? You gotta try to make changes and make risks to increase his capital here. So Carnegie, there you go. Make sure you remember that. You'll need to know him when you get to American history too. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Another innovator. Who else we talked about? So Henry Bessemer, the Bessemer process. Good job remembering that. Go ahead, Wyatt.
Samuel Morse.
All right, good job, Samuel Morse.
Morse code.
Yeah, good job. The telegraph, right? So in the 1830s, this means of communication started to appear. And for Great Britain especially, because this still falls under this first wave of the Industrial Revolution, even though considering the second, with communication, this is going to be key for resources, materials reaching their destinations. And when it comes to the military, obviously that's important. You need to make sure you can plan and strategize your next moves or defend yourself. So with this telegraph, right? Okay, this is a way with through dots and dashes to communicate back and forth, which travels at fast speeds. And with the telegraph, okay, Great Britain's going to control, especially when we get closer to World War I. They're going to have these cables, these cords that stretch literally across the world. One connecting Great Britain from the United States, okay, to the United States for this communication when it comes to this industrial production. And for Great Britain connecting its territorial possessions. Like I mentioned, Great Britain had territories all around the world. So these cables literally stretch around the world to connect to these territories and to these possessions here. And it's important for communication, right? When we get to World War I, Germany's going to have to rely, and these enemies of Great Britain, on these cables for communication. So Great Britain already has to step up. They know the next step. As long as they can, figure out the code, right? They can break the code, and Germany has, which they will, and that will get the United States involved. We'll talk about here soon enough. All right, what else we talk about? Might as well stick with communication here. Awesome. Dude, just stick with communication. I will come back to you.
Okay.
All right. Connor.
Alexander Graham Bell.
Yeah, Alexander Graham Bell. Good job. So the 1870s, United States here. Okay, he is inventing a way to communicate. This time by talking, right, over the telephone. It looked a little different than what we know today. Obviously, there's cell phones, and you have to actually hold these devices up to your head and speak into it. It looked a little weird, but in any case, this was a means of communication that's changed. No longer do you have to sit there and know the dots and dashes of Morse code, right? You can actually talk to someone on the other line, helping, advancing when it comes to industries and military. One thing to note is that you need a cord, a cable, right, to connect for this communication. So who later comes in and changes the game when it comes to communication? Connor, go ahead, thank you.
Quick question.
Okay.
Since they're connected by a cable, right?
Yeah.
Would that be a phone that Amish could use?
I know my Amish neighbors have some.
I don't know, so do mine.
I don't know, I don't get it. I guess.
Yeah, loud.
I don't think it really matters much. I guess it depends
Yeah.
how strict they are to their. Chris.
We have macaroni.
Yeah, macaroni. Yeah, good job. So Marconi, right? And what did he develop? What did he innovate, Chris? The radio. Yeah, good job. So there has to be something that you said with Tesla, Austin, and the radio, and how it's utilizing these radio waves, depending on the frequency and the wavelength to communicate back and forth. Now you don't need cables. Now you don't need ports. That's overall going to help and benefit, especially on the battlefield. Okay, as these cords and cables could be torn by just the inferiority of the battle. So now with these radios, you can eventually utilize them, be more portable, let's say as a backpack, as you're marching onto different lands and invading areas, and even applying it mobily into, let's say, a tank to be a little bit faster, more efficient on the battlefield. But at first, right, this broadcast could occur about 4 miles, and now it's a little bit more distant than that. And this means communication still around today, right? It's still around today. I'm sure you guys listen to radio in your cars. Yeah? No? Spotify, you
Not
probably
really,
listen to
yeah.
Apple Music. I figured. Oh, darn it. AM radio. Anybody listen to AM radio? Any of your parents? There's one guy I work with in the summer. He listens to AM radio. So the whole time. I change it on him. It gets all picked off. I make the presets. Different presets. FM. All right. Okay. Other innovation. Other innovation. Other. Let's go. Another one. Go ahead, Oz. Oh, so awesome. Oh man. All right, Tesla. Okay, what's the name for it? Yeah, good job. So with alternating current is a little bit different than what we have with direct current that Edison created, right? So alternating current is going to be more efficient, going to be more reliable, providing electricity to communities and let's say cities, right? Talk about Tesla. We watched a video yesterday, so you get a chance to check that out. We weren't here, and he's literally harnessing the power of Niagara Falls, the power of a city like Buffalo, New York. Okay, with this alternating current, it's still somewhat used today. Obviously, it's a little bit more advanced than what he created in the early 1900s, but this is groundbreaking. This is something better and more efficient than what Edison came up with direct current. Right. Also, we talked about his electromagnetic energy, right? So utilizing these microwaves to transmit information, electricity back and forth without cables, without wires. And this was shocking. Oh, yeah. Oh, there, good one. He's laughing here. All right. So this, Chris, you okay? Anyway, so with Tesla, okay, he was trying to utilize the Earth's electromagnetic energy that's emitting to produce this energy. Well, I won't say produce, but to transmit energy back and forth. And there is a stake with Marconi and Tesla, who actually developed the first radio. Because Tesla was right there. If not anything, yet more of a design, a better design than Marconi. But I don't know. Poor Tesla kind of got crapped on by Edison and Marconi. Edison, what do we know him for? Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, good job. So when it comes to light bulb, that's going to be important for industries that they can stay open at night, right? Before you just had to rely, let's say, on the sun and I don't know, candlelight or oil lanterns. But now you have the ability to stay open at night, keep these factories pumping out goods and materials, and helping with the higher supply. The higher supply, price goes down, and that's going to make it more convenient for, let's say, the consumer. And when you think about motion cameras, right, he helped develop this, and this is going to help inspire this entertainment age in the 1900s for the United States, the early 1900s. When you think of Hollywood, when you think of Disney, right, they're going to start to pop up here in the 1940s, especially when it comes to motion pictures. You guys ever heard Charlie Chaplin before?
Yeah.
Yeah? Child film star? He had the Hitler mustache before Hitler? Okay, all right. You know, Robert Downey Jr. played him in the movie too. Charlie Chaplin.
Played Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, Iron Man. Yeah, that was like his first movie. Okay, all right. Is there any questions here? The second wave. We good? Holy cow. That took a lot longer than I thought. But anyway, second wave. There you go. Right, here are your terms for today. Like I said, I know I'm diving into American history here, but it's all happening right at the same time within Europe and the United States. So you will talk about, you'll see with Upton Sinclair, the jungle, muckrakers, breaker boys, urbanization, the Meat Inspection Act. It's created by the United States here. But it's important to note that Europe and the US are going through this wave right at the same time. As the United States and Germany, right, are leading the way with this second wave. There you go. There you go. Googlio macaroni. Terms, mortgage. Check Sapphire then, since this is the start of a new marking period here. I want to make sure that your grades are up to date. If I missed something, let me know. Okay. I will adjust that. Just make sure you email me for whatever assignment that you may complete or they had done and I didn't grade or didn't have in the grade book. All right. Awesome. You guys need another minute? Okay, no problem. All right, so urbanization, what does that mean? Urbanization. So with industrialization, you'll have this. What do you got? Go ahead, Paul.
Process of making an area for
Okay, all right. So with urbanization, this is where many people in these rural areas that were once farmers are now transitioning. They're migrating to these urban areas, right? They're migrating to the cities where these factories are located, so they can earn a wage, right? They can, raise their standard of living. As this growth of food, when we talk about this agrarian revolution before we got to the industrial revolution, is providing a high supply of food. So with that, this is pushing these lower income, these poor farmers to the urban areas to find a job. Right? And with urbanization comes overcrowded living conditions. So we're going to talk today a little bit about the effects of industrialization and how many people are jam-packed in these cities, living in these small rooms. Let's say a room like this. Can you imagine all of us living in a room like this? No, I couldn't imagine. Like this, let alone. So anyway, with that, with urbanization, you have overcrowded living conditions. You have people, literally 20 people living in a room, classroom like this. So when it comes to the bathroom, do you think they had running water in every building, every apartment? No. All right. So when you had to use the bathroom, you just kind of toss it out. You went in a bucket, you toss it out in the street, and hope the rain just washed it away. Not great, right? Not great, especially when you think about food traveling on that road. Things have not become sanitary at all yet, right? With this industrial revolution, this is changing society, dynamics of society, and in some cases, initially, right, this made it a lot more unsanitary. It made it dirty, and it made it very prone for diseases and sicknesses spread all throughout these cities. And if these people are jam-packed living on top of each other, literally, right, this is going to cause diseases and sicknesses spread pretty quick. So initially in the early 1900s, late 1800s, you had a lot of people dying of dysentery, dying of just sickness and diseases that spread pretty rampant through this time. All right, so with urbanization, think of this movement, this migration from these rural areas to the urban areas where the factories are located. These people get jobs and causing a lot of overcrowded and a lot of unsanitary conditions for people. All right, Breaker Boys. What do you got here? Connor, go ahead.
The breaker board with coal mine worker separate coal mine.
Yeah, good job. So I'll show you a video tomorrow. These Breaker Boys, common here, Pennsylvania especially, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, would work in these coal mines 4 hours on end. Okay, literally 12, 14-hour shifts. And they would work 4 to 6 days a week. Can you imagine that? Oh man, I'd probably pick school, kind of sit through here, take video lessons. But anyway, they would literally sit on these chutes and try to pick through the different types of minerals, like let's say stones or debris from the coal. Obviously, you want the coal for more production. That's the money maker for you. As they're sitting on these chutes, they're literally sitting on a plank of wood for 12, 14 hours at a time. Can you imagine that? So also you think about it, these rocks and coal going down the chute, it's going to nick up your hands, right? It's going to mangle up your hands. And the video I'll show you tomorrow kind of shows the image of these Breaker Boys and these men that are older than talking about their experiences in the coal mines. Their hands are all cut up, their fingers are all mangled, and it's really it's a really terrible condition for kids, especially anybody at that time. So with these Breaker Boys, right, this is a story especially that hits home around here with these coal mining and andesite region that caused for and pushed for change when it came to labor and child labor laws. Matt.
I read that some of them were as young as 5 years old.
5 years old, yeah, yeah. So you can think, right, why with these industries, these business owners wanted children in the factories because they could fit tighter spots, right? They could crawl into spaces, let's say, in these mechanisms that try to, I don't know, break up a jam in case there was a jam, but they're small enough to fit it. But let's say that jam is broken free. What could happen to maybe the boy kid? Oh, squash, kill, who knows, right? And at that time, they just pull them out of the mechanism. Well, that sucks. We'll have to get a new worker now and keep the production rolling. Not like they just stop, have a cease of production. Pretty wild things, right? Up in Sinclair. So this goes along with the muckrakers and the jungle here. So I want to make sure I can get through some of these slides. What do we got for up in Sinclair? Go ahead, Connor. Thanks.
She was the Coastal Crusader from California, who's finding some kind of direction.
All right, yeah, so these muck rakers, they would literally rake up the dirt, the muck, so to speak, of these industries, these factories in the time. And with up in Sinclair, the jungle especially talked about the unsanitary conditions within the meat packing industry. So this time, right, when it comes to meat, when it comes to, let's say, cattle, right, they're bringing you into these lockers, and you think they had a means of sanitary conditions, you think they had procedures to keep this meat protected, let's say, from outside influences like rats? No, right? So if these rats would literally burrow into the meat, try to find a home in it, and let's say when it comes to eating it, obviously, when they would chop up then on the conveyor belt and package it up to be consumed, do you think they really cared too much about the rats? What do you think, Alana? No, they chopped them up along with the meat. They just said, you know what, there's a rat in there. Yeah, just keep it going, right? Package it up, we'll send it to the grocery store. Someone will eat it, no big deal. Hey, if they don't see it inside there, no problem, right? No problem. Pretty gross, isn't it? So with the conditions too, when it comes to coolers, it's not like they had the electric flow as what we do today. So this would attract a lot of these rodents, attract these rats into these cellars, right? These dark, damp cellars. And you got to think too, mold would grow on the meats, right? It would kind of go bad after some time. But that didn't stop the production. They just kept it rolling and, packaging up these items and selling them off for people to buy and consume. So this caused people to get sick, right? As you're eating up this moldy meat, this spoiled meat, and if, let's say, there's some rats in there, gross. Also, if you think about it, when you're cutting up meat, sometimes you might chop your finger off. You might actually find a finger inside your food too. But at the time, there's no regulations or laws about this. They just said, whatever, just spit it out and continue to eat, right? Yeah. All right, also to try to kill off the rats, what do you throw out? Rat poison, right? Sometimes rat poisoning would get into the meat that you're eating. Also, if you're working in some of these industries too, I don't know, you're sick that night, you're hocking up loogies, you're spitting in the meat, who cares? If it flies off the conveyor belt, pick it back up, throw it back on, no big deal. Gross, isn't it? Gross. But with the jungle, that's what Upping Sinclair was writing about, talking about these disgusting habits and how things needed to change. How this disease sickness spread quite a bit because of this poor unsanitary conditions. That helped bring on the Meat Inspection Act, where we actually see changes by the government stepping in to regulate some of these industries. All right, so we got 3 minutes here. We'll try to get through as much as we can, I guess. No, tomorrow. All right, so with urbanization, like I mentioned, during the Industrial Revolution, people moved from these villages, these rural areas, to find a better living, right? To find an opportunity in the workplace, especially when it came to these factories, these industries, these businesses that you can find, let's say in these industrial areas right by the harbor side, right by waterways, routes to transport these materials. That's when you're thinking about bigger cities, they're all focused on a larger river or let's say the shoreline, because that is the means of transporting these goods and materials. So people were migrating from these rural areas to the urban areas, causing urbanization, right? And with urbanization, some of these negative impacts is that you do have overcrowded living conditions. People literally living in rooms like this, 20, 30 people maybe. That's why when you see in classrooms or buildings, you see a limit, an occupancy limit of how many people actually can be in that room. In case, let's say, there is a fire, you can have everybody flow out, no problem. That there's not a mad rush and that there's not too many people jammed in a room all at once. Now we have regulations for this, but at the time you had to go through what? Growing pains, right? You had to go through some of these hardships to realize this new way of living. And with industrialization, that's what this brought. So with urbanization, think of it, the negative impacts, especially the overcrowded living conditions. I just talked about the running water. I talked about how there really wasn't anything like that. When it comes to sewer, when it comes to, I don't know, waste, they just threw it out in the streets, causing more disease and sickness to spread. And people being literally on top of each other in these cities. Pretty disgusting. So here's a kind of a look of what this urbanization, the detailed picture of it maybe of the late 1800s, mid 1800s in some of these cities. So you can imagine, right? If let's say there was a fire that sprung up, oh, well, it's going to probably burn down this whole city because people are jam packed right next to each other. These buildings are literally butting up against one another. And when it comes to the people, they're scattered. They're scattered onto the streets. And it kind of just shows that there's too much people in one location. And that is, again, some of the growing pains at the time. Eventually, you'll have apartment buildings and skyscrapers being built that kind of reach the skies, which will help out when it comes to this overcrowding. But at the same moment, at the same time, there's a lot of issues, negative impacts of this industrialization when you think of urbanization as overcrowding living conditions. All right, so here's kind of a look of what these cities would look like all across Europe and the United States, right? You can see the smog, the smoke pumping from these industries, these factories, as coal, like I said, was still the common source of fuel. And in many of these cities, it would blacken out the sky. You wouldn't even see the sun for weeks, days on end. Okay, in many cases for years because how much production was occurring and how harmful to the environment it really was. In China today, especially in Hong Kong, there is an issue when it comes to this production still, right? And they actually have billboards out of the sun to keep people happy. Like, oh, there it is. Even though you have the smog, the kind of the exhaust from these factories still pumping up in the sky. So yeah, it's still around today, but in many cases for the United States, we have regulations so you don't see this type of effects anymore, right? But I thought that was interesting to put in there. In places in China where this is still around, this production, this exhaust from these industries, they just put billboards up to try to keep people happy. Oh, there's the sun. There's the sun. All right, we'll continue this more tomorrow. We'll talk about Breaker Boys, the jungle, a little bit more in detail.